I can go first.
Crazy.
I just did some research about the Chinese government regarding the camera systems and the credit scores. Those two things are very related. The camera system, China has the most cameras in the world. Like
Mm-hmm.
in the top 10 cities, except London, the other 9 cities are all the top cities have the camera systems.
Mm-hmm.
It's over 6 million camera systems. It's like 13 times of the American. In
Wow.
other words, except the urban area in China, all the cities, the citizens are monitored by the camera system. So if we talk about the privacy, oh, it doesn't exist. And um, this thing also related to the credit scores in China. Like in the American, your credit score is just related to your financial situation, right? But in China, your public behavior, is related to your credit. So in other words, every people can go online to search your name and then find your score. That's a horrible thing for me, I think, because like the employers, they can check your scores and to determine if you are a good or bad person, right? And even your girlfriend, they can access your, your name and then determine if you're a good or a bad guy. You know,
Mhm.
um, the Oxford University said it brings a big black market because some people may, pay money to make a fake um, score, or some people they just hide themselves. It's like they are wearing a mask in a public place. They are not the true of them. They just want to behave good. You know, so
Mhm.
that really makes me worry about that. I don't understand why the government issued that policy, and I feel um, the more the government rely on this system, the score system, the more risk it exists. I don't know how you guys think.
I have a question. That's crazy. You're saying that their credit score is
Yes.
available to anybody? Anybody can look it up?
Yeah, just like you search the name on Google, but in China we use Baidu, another search
Mhm.
tool. So search your name and then they can find your score.
So how do people respond to the cameras? Are they just kind of like, it's no big deal, this is just the way it is, or do people actually resist or complain about it?
That's a very good question. For most of the Chinese people, they think it's just the way how government asks us and we just follow it. You know, some people think the system in China, they don't accept it. Some people may immigrate out to other countries.
Mm-hmm.
That's that's the truth.
And the other question that I had about it was, do you feel like that system helped China respond to COVID better?
Yeah, definitely. It's a 1 billion and 16,000 million people using WeChat, like WhatsApp, something like that.
Mhm.
When people using WeChat, um, it monitors the movements everywhere. Which city you go, the even give you corners. Like if you are in red corner, you are kind of risk. You have to be quarantined 14 days. If you are in Africa is orange, you are required to quarantine 7 days. If you are green, then it means you are okay. You can go everywhere.
Hmm.
So that's the way how China monitor
Right.
people's and then to the COVID.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I have
those
a
were my
question.
questions. Thank you.
I have a question. Now, so the government has access to these type of, I guess, availabilities of information because they're monitoring or surveilling their citizens. Now,
Yeah.
for example, what if a person were framed by another party? Would the citizens have access? Would they be able to get access to the different surveillance monitoring like objects or techniques that they use to like prove their innocence? Like, would
You know, I haven't lived in China for several years. I don't know how the details to do it. When I read the articles, it says like the employees can check your background is score, right? And then the universities can do that.
Mhm.
Um, it's just kind of very easy for people to want to get to know you.
Mhm. Okay.
I got a question on that. So
Uh-huh.
obviously, not everything is perfect, and sometimes there are mistakes. So I think this is sort of speaks to Douglas's question with fraud or whatever. But if there was some sort of mistake with the credit bureaus, at least in the U.S. for financial
Mhm.
credit, you can dispute that and take that up, and there's a process of correction. Is there a way, because I'm sure that the government makes or has made mistakes with judging a citizen's
Mhm.
character. How do
Yes.
you dispute that if there were any mistakes?
Oh, what's your last question? How?
Yeah. How do you dispute um, any sort of mistakes or errors that citizens may believe that the government has?
Like how to dispute this?
How do they dispute, right?
Yeah.
Mm, the research I just found, it also says like non-citizens are hiring the attorneys
Mhm.
to 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 I mean they think they are innocent. Um, mm, I I don't know. Oh, we lost Marcus. I don't know what is the result, but I also don't know how how the you know try to. I mean, what is the justice? What is right or what is wrong, right? Like some people they want to hide the where they go, right? They don't want to tell people. Is that a criminal action? No, I don't think so, right? So that's kind of go back to the people's freedom, right?
Yeah, because I see this as sort of like the government is a judge, jury, and executioner when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to this. And if there was a mistake made, because there's bound to be mistakes, not everything's perfect. So
Yes.
if there was a mistake and you wanted to take that up and dispute that and have some sort of correction,
Mm-hmm.
to me there would have to be some sort of like independent agency or organization that you could go to fix anything that there was a dispute over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand what you mean. We also need to do some research on that too. This system is just established in these 2 years. It's still ongoing. So there are a lot of gaps to fill in, I think. Marcus, you are mute. I saw you're talking.
Oh, I was just saying that makes sense that it's new, that it's kind of new information. I think I'll go in this next one because it kind of goes along with yours.
Mhm.
I was thinking on just to be specific about the question about how much government intrusion into daily life is acceptable, and then the examples being like security cameras, airport searches, and even the biometric tracking for COVID being proposed. I think the cameras, I mean, when I think of the cameras, I think of, getting a ticket when you run a light because there's a camera there. I think of I personally have done the TSA pre-check because I flew a lot in the last few years. So I did that. And I even did clear. A younger me probably would not have done that, just because, who's to say, if I wanted my information in there. But at this juncture in my life, the convenience was, I think, worth it. And when we talk about personal freedoms, that kind of goes to COVID. And I think about, the mask and people feeling like it was an encroachment on their freedom to have a mandate to wear masks and things like that. And I think that people aren't always going to do what's right for the whole good. So the mask mandate, as much as they can do it, even with the current CDC, like if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. Like, who's going to be honest about whether, especially if they never believed in it or whatever. I think it's hard in the United States to really impose those types of mandates and get complete, compliance. I think it's really important that, there's some sort of way of monitoring, but I'm not one that thinks that my freedom should encroach on someone else's. And if it's a life or death situation, I'm kind of on the fence both ways. I don't want anybody tracking me to see if I have, if I got the actual, I don't want anybody like tracking me to see if I got the vaccine or what my results were and things of that nature. So I give my consent for TSA pre-check. I gave my consent for clear, where that information, I'm not guaranteed to know what's going to happen with that information. If they're using it for other things, it's not like our government wouldn't do that. They may not say it, but I think they would still probably do it. Areas where I think having cameras, I know I'm just going all over, but I'm just trying to hit all my points. Having the cameras, just even going back to the George Floyd trial and utilizing cameras from the area, not just what people recorded, but actual storefront and other cameras, they were able to get a lot of different vantage points. It doesn't always work to our advantage, but I think there's a give and take on both sides. And I think it really just comes down to each given situation, where I feel like that personal freedom, kind of reduction in personal freedom benefits the policy in certain situations. And then, so Charlie was asking specifically which question. We're speaking to how much government intrusion into daily life is acceptable. And then to further explain, consider the examples of security cameras and airport searches by the TSA or recent proposals for biometric tracking in light of the COVID-19. So the question is this personal freedom reduction worth the benefit that you get out of it? And do other nations view trade-offs in similar ways? So my last piece on the other nations is, I think it's more challenging in the United States than it might be in other areas because of some of the specific freedoms that have already been kind of reduced in the first place. So I'm not sure how everybody else feels about those specific topics.
I don't know. In light of the main question or the first question, like how much government intrusion is acceptable or until you realize they cross the line, it's like with any research, like with any, any question that you ask, you're going to have people on both sides of the fence. But I feel that for as long as you're not doing anything wrong, it shouldn't come back to bite you in the butt.
Mm-hmm.
But then who's to say what's wrong and what's right? You have a married couple, one of the spouses is cheating on the other, so they have these policies out there that would, well, we can tell you if your husband or wife is cheating on you or not, because we've used this for this and this is what he's been doing. All right, so then that brings the question, well, do I trust it or do I not? Or do I want to be followed or do I not? I think it all comes down to is, the government just wants to have a better, be able to manage the situation for the government as a whole. And I don't think it's put out there so much so that it can intrude or violate people's individual lives. But in order for it to work effectively, sometimes that's what it has to do. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I truly think that it's put out there to, to be able to manage society so chaos doesn't break loose, but you have your occasional, cases. As far as the biometrics, I looked into that this morning because I wasn't too clear on what it encompassed. But again, it's another situation where they're just wanting the, your travel experience to be that much better, to go that much faster, and like the disadvantages of it. Of course, it can get out of hand. We just come into the digital age where, uncertainty is like really high. You don't know what's going to happen. This is our first time that we're doing something like this. So it doesn't give you any sense of assurance or reassurance that, one person can be 100% protected if we go along with these ramifications or parameters or policies, right? So it's just, it's going to continue to be hit and miss. I guess it's a matter, once again, if you're doing the right things, then you shouldn't be bothered. If you're out there, getting caught with your pants down, of course you're going to have problems with it. But then again, it's like, well, if you are out there with getting caught with your pants down, where do they start to intrude on your life, as opposed to someone else who may be doing something different, but they decide to overlook. You know what I
Right.
mean?
And I
So
think,
then go
no,
for it, Marcus.
I agree. Go ahead. No, I just to kind of jump in on that piece. I think the intrusion, like you said, if you're not doing anything wrong, and I think that's where the policy piece comes in. Like when they write out, we're going to do these for these reasons. The difference in that is that the policy it's in the implementation of the policy. Even flying back, it's saying, hey, you have to quarantine for 10 days if you came back into California on a flight today. I'm not going to stay in the house for 10 days. It's so I'm not actually doing that. So I don't know what the ramifications will be for that. And, it just comes down to what is an overreach. And I think individuals feel that way. And I don't feel like I'm doing anything wrong. I did a COVID test before I left. I did vaccine, different things like that. So for them to say, hey, you got to quarantine for 10 days, to me, has that been updated with taking your mask off? You know what I mean? So,
Right.
so I think about policy and I think about implementation across the board. So sorry to cut you off.
No, it's fine.
Like that.
Yeah, and it's just, I don't know. It's the government. It's put there so they can, like I said, manage society so that we don't, end up in chaos, or there's not some type of like political fervor that creates outbreak. But ultimately, I think their intentions are well. I think it's the people, the individuals that work within the policy or that help form the policy that allows it to go sour or to go bad, because they know the ins and the outs of it, and they understand, or they find out where they can cheat here, not there, and put it here and use it over here. So I think as long as if there's a unit or like, an organization that can come in and set in its checks and balances, we'll be fine. But I don't know, a lot of people think differently about that. I was reading that, in the terms of privacy policy or public privacy, it goes all the way back to, Roe versus Wade, with, sexual, with abortions and things like that. And it's just kind of like, well, everybody has a different case. Everybody has a different story. It's not about what happens. It's more about what you do about it. I think it's the best way to look at it.
I got a question for you, Dennis. Do you think that although the policy is put in place for these purposes, do you feel governmentally, do you feel like the government will utilize this information for other purposes?
I mean, if it has a way, if it has an impact, or it can contribute to, the effects on a different side of government or a different department of government, I think they would. It's just, it's like research, when you go to further your research, perhaps we can use this to understand this. So it's like, if you're, let's say if you're, the roads in one state are or maintained good, or they're, in good condition, how are they able to achieve that? Then they're going to take that to another state to see if it will work there as well. So I'm sure they would. It's just to what level will they allow it to be, to what level they will allow it to be utilized is probably where the question lies.
So I go back to one of the museums, the Spy Museum, and where they had J. Edgar Hoover and spying on different activists in the country and things of that nature. They wouldn't say they're going to do those things, but now there are much more devices and technology allows for that. That's kind of where I was going. Do you think maybe governmental agencies are using this, saying it's for one thing, but using it for something else?
Oh, of course. Like, I just did some reading on the definition of biometrics and what it involves in it. It's a device, or not a device, but like technology that they use to be able to detect a person's physical attributes and also their behaviors, right? So when you say behaviors, I thought back to the Spy Museum, and when we were in there, you come across a scenario, you read it, and then it's kind of like you think about it, and it's like, does that scenario attract you in some type of way? Like you would like perhaps you would want to be involved in such an act, or would you be good at it, or would that be something that you just don't care about and you just leave behind? So I look at that, and when they said behaviors, I thought, well, if they're in our heads, and they're probably listening to how we're thinking. So, it's kind of like that's a one way to measure to see if somebody would actually be involved in wanting to become a spy themselves, or if that area of life interests them, to see if, maybe we should look into this person, their background, and see what they're about, because they kind of had the right answers or the right questions to ask, to express interest, or they really didn't care about that exhibit or the museum, so we can like leave them alone. I think that's one way to measure a person's interest or level of involvement to things like that. So I would say, yeah, I think to answer your question, I think they would use it for different things for different reasons. Or
And
do I
I
agree with
quickly
it?
want to comment on the government overreach thing, because this is something that, again, it's been politicized, but there was also something about like maybe 10, 15 years ago after 9/11, when you had the Patriot Act and you had, you know, surveillance, government surveillance on, emails, um, telephone calls, and all in the name of national security after 9/11, and that was heavily politicized as well. You had a bunch of Republicans, uh, pro-military, that were for it, and then you had the Democrats on the side of, well, that is a violation of the privacy, uh, and you guys are racial profiling. You guys are specifically targeting Muslims and people in the Middle East, of Middle Eastern descent. And there were serious implications on that. You had the FBI knocking on your door if you were found to be suspicious. And now at this time, you sort of have the same, type of politicization on both sides, but this is in the name of public health. And you have the Republicans heavily against it for the large part, because their premise is on the denial of science, and you have mostly the Democrats in favor of this type of policy because it's science based, they say, and so it's very, the parallels of now and then, revolving this discussion is strikingly similar, and so I just think it's that's what it sort of reminds me of. It's we're dealing with the same thing, but I think you do have to find the balance between of public health and having the interest of the citizens in policy, but also balancing the concerns that others are raising with privacy.
Totally agree. I totally agree. You want to go with yours, and then we can probably cut out and after that, because we're at about, I don't know when you started recording, but we probably are getting close to that. So go ahead, Charlie, with your particular viewpoint.
Oh, that was it, actually.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I completely agree. It basically, it seems like there's a balance, and part of it is good faith, thinking that it's going to do good for the common community and things of that nature. And I think it's really important that we are on top of those things and protecting ourselves and understanding, all information shouldn't be given out there, but also being aware that sometimes we're not going to know that it's being used for other purposes. That would be my kind of consensus on that. Or anybody else wanted to add anything?
Yeah, I quickly just wanted to add that this time, I mean, with the implications of federal law enforcement back with 9/11 happening, is totally different than now. I mean, there's no I guess, consequences legally for someone who breaks quarantine. And that's, I mean, I think that's sort of the difference. And I think people should be more trusting this time, because you don't have federal police knocking on your door if you break quarantine or have you. But I do think that, you should try and get people to understand. I guess the CDC has been sort of, they have sent mixed messages all throughout the whole thing. They haven't been consistent with trying to get people to understand exactly what COVID is, how you can avoid it. And then you've had a whole inconsistency with leadership across the country with I'll take Florida, for example, who's, their restrictions have virtually been non-existent since April of last year. And then you have California with these super stringent and super harsh restrictions. And I think there has to be a happy medium. And that, I think, played a huge role in trusting the government. And so I think the big thing with policy is having that public trust is probably like the biggest thing. And that's something that the public hasn't had since the beginning, because of all the mixed messages you see across leadership, whether it be national level or the state level or even local level.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that, the commonality is fear of another attack from 9/11, fear from death with over, I don't even remember what the most recent count on deaths from COVID, but using fear to implement policy and trying to figure out how they're going to make a balance or create a balance in that and build trust. And I think consistency will build trust, and not having that made this probably more challenging than it had to be.